Schaap, this court in jury has heard testimony from a former New York Times reporter who was told by his national editor, Times reporters in this courtroom notwithstanding, told by this national editor, Claude Siddon, go to Memphis and nail Dr. King. Those were the words Earl Caldwell used in this testimony here. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
Oh, absolutely. Hoover was you see from the memos in the report, Lord knows what we don't know and haven't seen, was sending people out everywhere to talk to all of their friendly media contacts to get King, and they would usually deliver packets of information, much as false, to be used as part of the campaign. They also used a lot of very interesting tactics. You see in these stories a lot of fuzzy. I mean, the story that's on the screen, for example, has a sentence in it near the end where it says, "Many blacks have mixed feelings about Dr. King." This is they teach you in Journalism 101 not to use sentences like that. What does it mean, everybody have mixed feelings about anything? If you want to do it, you say who has what feelings. But the whole thing was to try to say he's violent, he's hanging around with violent people, and basically that the blacks in this country shouldn't support him.
What was this operation like, this media blitz, this media disinformation campaign? What was it like after Dr. King was killed?
Well, for one thing, the attempts to discredit Dr. King, particularly the FBI attempts, did not stop after his death. They continued to send out their little dossiers and reports and phony information to try and discredit his memory. They also, in the beginning, when of course the assassin had not yet been caught, or rather no one had yet been caught and charged with the assassination, had to give the impression that the FBI was doing a great job. I mean, one of the criticisms that was unavoidable was when Hoover had already publicly attacked Dr. King in all these magazines and said he was a liar and thought he was the worst problem facing the United States and so on. It became a problem for the FBI then to try and convince America that they were doing everything in their power to apprehend his killer. And to do that, they had to pull out all stops and get all their friendly columnists writing story after story that they were doing everything they could, and also subsequently to try and add to the stories that they were convinced that James Earl Ray was the lone assassin.
We put up this article, and the story relates to a Jack Anderson column.
Yeah, this is interesting for what it reveals later. This was a story that came out in 1975. It's actually an interesting example of Jack Anderson criticizing a group of people of whom he fails to mention he was one at the time. Something that happens often when columnists decide to clear the slate. But he was reporting at this time about how the FBI had waged the campaign against Dr. King, how he knew about it, how he knew about all these scurrilous accusations that were being handed out. The story is only interesting because why didn't he say it at the time? Is one's first thought. But at least he made a breast of some of it. He also was able to explain that a number of the rumors about Dr. King had been proven to be not true. What he didn't know at the time, because the congressional report came out a little bit later, what he didn't know is that even the FBI at the time they were spreading the stories when Dr. King was alive knew that the stories were not true.
Now, at the same time they were trying to discredit Dr. King and continue to discredit his name after he was killed, they were trying to enhance the manhunt and the law enforcement work during that time.
Yeah, not only enhanced, but use hyperbole that was pretty bizarre, although of course you can understand the pressures that were on them when no one had been caught. Drew Pearson, who was a very close friend of Hoover's, had a nationally syndicated column and wrote one basically designed to try and kill the rumors that Hoover wasn't trying hard because he didn't like King. And in it, Pearson says he is convinced that the FBI is conducting perhaps the most painstaking, exhaustive manhunt ever before undertaken in the United States. How he would know is beyond us, but that's clearly what Hoover told him to say. They also, I don't have the clipping here, but they also had another one of their very close operatives, Jeremiah O'Leary, who was then with the Washington Star, did an article for the Reader's Digest, and he went one beyond Pearson and said it was the greatest manhunt in law enforcement history in the world. So he was now saying this wasn't only the greatest manhunt in America, it was the greatest manhunt ever anywhere. There were a whole series, and of course when Ray was arrested, then there was a spate of sort of self-congratulatory columns done by the same friends of the FBI showing what a wonderful job they had done.
Are there any other aspects of this coverage after Dr. King's death that were really media operations?
Well, there certainly are, in my opinion. At this point, once we get beyond the things that have been admitted in the congressional reports, I'm drawing my conclusions based on my own experience and expertise, but it certainly seems clear that there were media operations around not only that the FBI had done a wonderful job, but also on the campaign to demonstrate that not only that James Earl Ray had done it, but that he had acted alone.
What are the possible operations that you actually see?
Well, you see in stories, again, by friends of the FBI, statements like, it looks like the theory that there was a conspiracy is untrue. The FBI has exploded the theory that there was a conspiracy. Even people who had a written... See, they got caught a little bit because in the beginning they were planting stories that had conspiracy. I mean, there was a story that the FBI planted at the very beginning saying that Dr. King had been killed by the husband, by an irate husband of a lover of his. Now later, 10 years later, we saw that this was invented and they had made up this story. But then they were sort of stuck because if you're saying that Ray was hired by somebody else to do it, that's a conspiracy. So then they had to drop that story because now the line was that there was no conspiracy. So now they're saying, and the same people, Pearson mentioned that story and then later on denounced the generally prevalent theory that the murder involved a conspiracy without pointing out that he was one of the people who were part of the original prevalent theory. Particularly actually after the guilty plea, when it got, there was no longer a judicial proceeding going on about which they could feed the stories they wanted to. They still felt a compulsion to periodically come up with stories that there was no conspiracy, there was no plot. The one on the screen being another one of these examples.